In my first video about speed, we're going to talk about land vehicles and how the ROCs are almost as fast, or if not faster, than most of the Cyclone series. Let's get into it. So, there was some major changes in 3.17.3 live patch that were right before CitizenCon 2022. Um, yes, I know. I'm definitely a fan of lore, but let's just keep the years sane right now. CitizenCon rolled out a new vehicle, the STV, which is the Grey Cat's sport vehicle partner of the Grey Cat PTV. But the, this is a very strange situation indeed. We've had cyclones that went from 50 meters a second down to 32, 31 in the category. And weaponized cyclones, I can certainly see a little bit of that, why it would make sense that a Cyclone AA needed to go down from 46 meters a second to 31. Cyclone MT, for example, a very, very well equipped weapon system platform for multiple types of combat, went from 40 down to 30. However, because the Cyclones went down in speed so significantly, it's not in a vacuum. We saw speed increases of the ROC series up to 35 meters a second on the ROC and the ROC DS. So, in fact, the ROC is faster than the entirety of the Cyclone series, except for the Cyclone RC, only because of its boost. And that boost is very important because that racing variant is actually able to boost through to go faster than these other craft, but only for short times, and has to carefully use it. Now, why was all this done? If you speak with John Crew, who was in the CitizenCon videos, he mentions that the 50 ms, 55 ms is insanely fast for off-roading capabilities. It's like past what even a rally car could accomplish in modern day. And I understand where that's coming from, but I do look at the Ursa Rover that got nerfed from 45 down to 25, and I say, okay, a bit of an armored vehicle with life support systems for multiple people, has a remote cannon, so you don't even have to risk yourself, unlike the Cyclones that you're basically exposed more. But then I start looking at the Ballista, the Spartan, and the Centurion, where the Ballista's still holding at 25 meters a second at its new speed. Spartan's at 26, and the Centurion is at 25. And I say, well, wait a minute. These are large armored vehicles with a whole bunch of wheels, and they have the Ballista is able to shoot down ships very well. The Centurion is a short range little monster, and the Spartan can hold an incredible amount of people. Although that's kind of its job, is to kind of breach through a line, I suspect, and get into an outpost and invade it, that kind of thing. Or get defenders where they need to get to quick, because it doesn't have much of a primary weapon system other than its remote cannon. But I still look at these things and I say, these are much stronger vehicles. And then I look at the Nova, which is now at 30 meters a second and holding there. And I say, well, wait a minute. The Nova is a tank. The Nova is this heavily armored, shielded vehicle that has a main cannon on board and has soon to be unlimited plasma rockets. And that is something that I just don't comprehend, how the Nova is faster than the Ballista, Spartan, and Centurions, particularly the Spartan. It's quite strange to me. And then you look at the Cyclone series and you say, well, wait a minute, the Nova is going the same speed as the Cyclone MT? Huh? The whole point of the Cyclone series is supposed to be that they be carried on smaller craft, they're lightweight, they are exposed, keywords, there's no life support on the Cyclones, and also the people on board, you can physically see them. You can injure them and wound them with small arms fire, which you try doing that to a Nova, they're going to just laugh at you. So I caution CIG on this, and I really question why they kept the Nova's speed so much while nerfing the Cyclone so severely. And the reason for this is kind of like, I think they were kind of in a rock and a hard place. The two vehicles I haven't brought up yet are the PTV and the STV. The PTV Grey Cat had to be buffed because they built an entire race course for it that's going to be in 3.18, it's looking like. And it's been provided on the official videos. And they buffed it from 15 meters a second to 24, Now, the PTV is the little buggy that everyone's familiar with. I've had one since the Hanger module, and I can tell you I love that thing. I'm glad it got a speed boost, but I can also tell you it desperately needs some Golden Pass treatment. It probably could have used a weapon rack, which they gave to the STV, not the PTV. And also, it's anybody who uses them, the wheels are extremely small, and it's more meant to just pout around in a hangar or drive around a facility with improved roadways, very short range, that kind of thing. The minute you start going off road with a PTV or try to go up a ramp or something like that, you may have a bad time. With the extra speed, it may help, but really that job is to the new kid on the block, the STV, which was released at CitizenCon this year. The STV has a 40 meter a second speed, but no boost. So, ironically, the Cyclone RC can outrun it for short times until its boost runs out. However, it has that ability to go off road like the Cyclones. It has the speed advantage now that everything else has been nerfed. And it also can carry two boxes for box missions. And it also has some storage for local weapons, personal storage, etc. So it's an exciting vehicle, I think, for kind of weird reasons. I think that the speed changes were necessary. I think the Cyclones got hit a little too hard with the bat, and I think that the Nova is kind of in a weird position where it's faster than the Ballista Spartan and Centurion, which are vehicles that I think some players will seriously take a look at this and wonder, how come the tank can outrun me? Shouldn't a tank have to have some disadvantage to be able to have unlimited ammunition with the smaller plasma missiles, and of course having the main cannon to hit larger targets that it necessary? For reminder, the Nova has those unlimited plasma missiles on the eventual design. Right now, it's just conventional missiles that are not unlimited, but in the first Tavaran War, what the Tavaran figured out was if we pick a fight with these Novas that are slow, ungainly, but large and difficult for us to defeat, we just keep throwing trash vehicles at this thing. Eventually, it'll run out of secondary missile systems. So trash ships, trash missiles, and then eventually the Nova would run out of main cannon ammo as well, and they'd be overwhelmed. So the Nova designers from the UE Navy went back and were like, oh my goodness, the UE Army went back and said, hey, we need to have a system that can handle these type of developments. So the Nova has enough power on board to develop plasma missiles that it can fire at these small, weak targets that are continuously hitting it. That's literally its job. It's not meant to be fast. It's meant to be a untouchable brick that can hold an area. So it's an interesting position it's put in. And I don't know, it's pretty high up on the speed list now. Now, once again, I'm going to provide links to all this stuff. I should have an infographic up as well. But it's just an interesting place to be, and I can't wait to see how the dust settles on these speed changes. This is the one set of speed changes that happened during CitizenCon. There's also massive speed changes to ships. I'm going to make another video just talking about the different kinds of issues that ships have, but I wanted to get a first thoughts video together about the changes to ground vehicles. And also, the main value of this is not just so you're aware of these new changes and why is my vehicle suddenly nerfed or better, but also considerations for the STV, which is now on sale. I know people look at war bonds, people look at upgrades and such, and they think, hey, is this worth it for me? And I'm going to now change gears here a little bit and talk about the 9-minute mark, why STVs are good or not good. If you find yourself in a box mission constantly, it's a great little vehicle. I will caution that I strongly suspect that other vehicles, as they get their golden passes, will gain some utility. This is not going to be the only option available to you. That's sub the size of a Spartan or an Ursa, but it's certainly a good option. There was some concept designs that look more utility vehicle minded than this one eventually came out as. However, I do like the simplicity of the vehicle. I'm not the biggest fan of the paints or the color schemes, colorways, except for the black and gray one. But I will say that it's not a bad pickup. It's a shame that the price is so high. $35 USD for the war bond, 40 USD for the full. I really wish this was an option at, let's say, 25, 30 max. The PTV still sits at 15 USD. So remember that in the back of your head, that if you don't find yourself in off-road conditions constantly, or if you find yourself in a situation where, hey, I've got proper ground vehicles for this or that, I'm thinking more of this for just powering around my org hangar in the future, or driving around the developed outpost that will have these cleared out areas. The STV is kind of overkill for those things. That being said, having a weapon rack is going to become more and more valuable over time for you and your passenger, being able to mount just a simple single weapon on the side of the vehicle, and also have the box storage, personal storage is nice. For at that speed especially, it's going to be pretty interesting to see the vehicle combat change now, with this speed drop down of all the cyclones, especially aside from the RC, of course. Uh, um, if you count its boost, I would argue that it still has a place. However, don't go melting or whatnot to pick up a STV, your Cyclone MTs or your Cyclone TR or your AA. The combat variants of Cyclones are still going to have a value, especially if you don't have a big enough ship to move around something bigger like a Ballista or a Centurion or a Nova. Or you just don't like the Ursa in general. I think the Ursa is still strong, even if it only goes 25. It's the same speed as it's 1 meter a second slower than the Spartan. The Ursa is much smaller than the Ballista Spartan Centurion combinations and much smaller than the Nova. So the Ursa is a wonderful unit, especially in a place that may not have, let's say, strong cooling or heat issues or life support issues. Being able to drop off on a moon and drive around and not have to worry about your personal air is pretty awesome. The STV and PTV, even the RCs do not have that capability, or the Cyclones have that capability. I think the Ursa is still a hidden gem, for those who had the Connie series that came with the Ursas. Congrats. For those who are lucky enough to have such a thing, where they have a ship that could coordinate really well with the Ursa and work well. And I still see the STV has a place for people that were already running around with a PTV anyway, or a hover bike. I think that's kind of interesting. Onto that, I think that a hover bike that has two seats, like say the Drake Dragonfly, still has a value that the STV cannot, in that it can go into places that the STV cannot drive, and it does not even have to worry about terrain access. There is a value that's going to be coming out soon where we're going to see this, which vehicles can access rough terrain better than others. And for example, the PTV, as I mentioned earlier, does not do well with bad terrain. The ROC series tends to have a few troubles, but that seems to be more buggy kind of steering issues than anything, with the short wheelbase and the small wheels they have. Compared to some of the other vehicles on the list. I think of the Spartan, for example. I keep using that as the gold standard, even though no matter how dang big the thing is, it seems to just kind of wander through places that you would not expect a vehicle to do well in. The Ursa even better, where it's just big enough to squeeze in, but it still has a reasonable wheelbase. It can do quite well for larger vehicles. So that's kind of the lineup right now. I once again, I stress that don't go melting everything you have if you're really into ground vehicles just for the STV. It is a cool new vehicle. It is useful for box runners if you're dedicated. That's your type of gameplay. Up to 2 players, that would be wonderful. I do wish, on my wish list, I wish the STV had 4 seats, not 2. Even if it just had 2 weapon racks for single weapons. I feel that the extra 2 back seats or whatnot would be very nice. I do want to point out that the STV has a spare tire on the back of it. I'm very curious if that's not just a for show thing. On the marketing, they of course say, oh, we have a spare tire. If that becomes a mechanic where you actually get your tire shot out and you're able to replace it with a spare, I could see larger vehicles having the ability to fit that spare. I mean, you open up the back of a Nova, there's plenty of space. You open up the back of a Spartan, for example, plenty of space. But maybe not so much in some of the smaller vehicles, and certainly not possible in a Cyclone series. So I'm very curious if the tire aspect will become a thing, Or sorry, the main Cyclone you may have the storage space for, but the rest of them, no. So would be interesting to see if that's going to become a factor. Having spare parts on board, I think that's a little in the weeds. I think the way we've heard from CIG is repair tools that require battery use in the future uh, seem to be like the magic tool that fixes most things, patches them enough to get you back to the base. Um, so yeah, real cool stuff. Really exciting. Let me know what you think if you want to talk about ground vehicles. I am not a ground vehicle expert. I'm more just kind of doing a general org level talk. And I'm thinking of folks that are using ground vehicles are not usually solo players aside from box runners, which is why I kept focusing on that niche. But a lot of folks that run ground vehicles tend to do it for machinima, for different cool, exciting shots, screenshot type stuff as well to kind of flesh out an outpost and make it look more exciting. And then also you have organizations that want to practice their large military lift capacity and say a Hercules and just dump 9 vehicles on the ground in different directions and they want to have a good time together. And then finally the racing portion. So I'm trying to bite my tongue and not speculate about those things too much because I have yet to see how the brand new vehicle, the STV, is handling, or any of these new vehicles that are handling on the new speed charts. I myself have broke out my Cyclone MT after the speed nerf, and it really didn't feel that different to me, even though supposedly on the paperwork it's 25% slower. It seemed to handle just fine. So I don't know. I think there's going to need to be a lot more testing and figuring out what exactly has the implications of these speed changes are going to be. But certainly, major change right before the launch of a new vehicle is not exactly comforting to many who own these vehicles and really like them. All right, fly safe.